The top business stories live from the Sky News City studio. The Bank of England holds its main policy rate at 5.25%, but indicates the cost of borrowing could come down soon.
Based on where we are today, and the world not changing, the path is downwards.
Spain's second largest lender makes a hostile takeover bid for TSB parent Sabadell. And marking 70 years since Wimpy first opened, bringing the hamburger from the United States to the UK. Good afternoon, this is Business Live with me, Ian King. The Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee has held its main policy rate at the current 16-year high for the sixth consecutive meeting. The MPC voted to maintain bank rate at the 5.25%, at which it has stood since last August. But the vote this time was 7-2 against, a rate cut compared with 8-1 against last time. And the Governor, Andrew Bailey, hinted today that a rate cut in June remained possible. Well, Mr. Bailey said that inflation, which the MPC is mandated to maintain at 2%, was heading in the right direction. But he added that the committee needed to see more data before a decision to cut bank rate could be made. Well, our economics editor, Ed Conway, has been speaking with Andrew Bailey about what exactly the MPC needs to see next.
We've made a judgment that the persistence of inflation, we think, going forwards is less than we thought it was. And one of the big judgments we've had to make for some time is, well, what are going to be the sort of, what we tend, I mean, they're technically called the second round effects, the after effects of this. How long is it going to sort of cast a shadow and we're going to have higher inflation? And that's a judgment. Now, encouragingly, we think the evidence that we're seeing suggests it's reasonable to think that that will be somewhat less than we thought. But as members of the committee, we take different views on sort of how confident we are in that picture. Some more so, some less so. Speaking for myself, I think it's a very reasonable sort of picture to adopt for the future, but I'd like to see some more evidence of it coming into sort of.
So you're kind of, so you're ready to cut, but we just need to see a little bit more data yet.
Yeah, I think the path is, based on where we are today, and the world not changing. Yeah. The path is downwards.
Okay. But how soon? I mean, I know that you can only decide 1 metre at a time. Okay, so that's fair enough. But a lot of people in the markets think it might be June, maybe August, only a few cuts coming up. I mean, when you look at what markets are expecting, you think, oh, actually, it might be a bit more than that.
Every meeting is a fresh decision. Every meeting in that sense is in play. I was very clear this morning. I said, look, it's not a fait accompli and it's not ruled out for the next meeting, which is in June, and the same would be true of August as well.
So it's possible in June, possible in August as well. Yeah. So at the moment, interest rates are restrictive, okay? And in normal language, that means they're bearing down on the economy. Yeah. But some might say causing some degree of economic pain. Is it fair to say that you think that little bit extra, a few more months of economic pain, are a price worth paying for having inflation properly tamed? Is that fair?
Our job is to have inflation at the target on a sustained basis, and that's a judgment we have to make.
Right, but higher interest rates. So that means you're inflicting more pain for a little bit longer for certain numbers of households.
We're not yet ready to make that judgment to make them less restrictive, but I'm very encouraged by what's happening. We've got a situation, as best we can judge, where I think the recession we had in the second half of last year was very shallow. I think we'll know tomorrow morning, but I think it looks like it's ended.
Finally, I don't know if you saw, but I interviewed Liz Truss in Washington not long ago. She in her new book has blamed kind of a lot of the problems that she encountered both in office directly and indirectly on you. Mm. What do you make of those criticisms?
Well, as you actually, I did see some of your interview actually, and as you brought out, I've never met Liz Truss. We've never met, so and I don't therefore pass judgment on Liz Truss because I don't know Liz Truss.
But do you find it odd that she is kind of calling you essentially you're the bogeyman of that book at least? Well,
obviously I don't agree with it as a judgment, but I say I've never met her. I've never had the opportunity to discuss it with her.
Was it weird though that you were never called up when all of this was happening in her time in office?
Well, I mean, look, to be fair, these were very unusual circumstances. As you may remember, I mean, it's not just that Liz Truss wasn't Prime Minister for very long, but of course part of her time as Prime Minister was effectively the mourning period for the Queen, and that obviously we were all in that position. So, look, to be very fair to Liz Truss, and I'd always try to be very fair, it was a very unusual period.
And Ed is with me now. Ed, a couple of really significant developments today, I thought. One was obviously the change in the vote from 8-1 to 7-2, but also it was the fact that it was one of the bank's internal members, Dave Ramsden, who switched his vote. Does that suggest that the MPC's perhaps doing a bit of pitch rolling ahead of a June rate cut?
Normally, yeah, when it's those internal senior members who are shifting across, that often prefigures the rest of the committee kind of going in that direction as well. And it is this, I can remember we've had these moments before where a few go and then the rest of them kind of topple over. And it does feel like we're in that moment at the moment. And when you listen to what Andrew Bailey was saying just then, well, as you saw, I was trying to push him on, when is this likely to happen? Understandably, the bank never, ever says, look, it's going to be then. But I think you can see kind of got about as close as he would get within the parameters of what the bank tends to do and how it tends to pitch these things, of saying it could very easily be in June. So that's June the 20th. It could very easily be in August as well. So we're that close to things right now. A lot depends on what happens with the next set of data. So we've got inflation data coming out in a couple of weeks. That's going to be interesting because that's the moment where inflation potentially gets down to 2%. That's the target that it's been away from for all this time. You've got GDP data coming out tomorrow. That's going to be interesting because it will show, presumably, based on what we know already, that the economy is growing again. So we're no longer in that recession. So there are kind of bits of good expected news. But the bank, I guess, just wants to be absolutely certain that it's got those things kind of ticked off before it starts cutting interest rates. But yeah, they are hinting that rate cuts are coming very soon. And as the bank goes, that's about as close, as much as we can expect from them, given what the way they tend to communicate these things.
The other thing, Ed, was, I thought the most interesting moment of the press conference is when Andrew Bailey said that he thought markets might not necessarily have the right idea on what the bank's going to do this year. Now, at the moment, the market's pricing in 2 rate cuts this year. Mr. Bailey hinted that there might be more to it than that. Yeah, he did. Actually, I tried to get him to repeat that in our interview, as you saw from one of my questions, and he didn't quite take the bait. But yeah, that is exactly the point. There could well be more rate cuts, because if you look at the market curve for interest rates, it's a much more shallow than it was only a few months ago. So that's quite interesting. Clearly, they are trying to give a signal that there are more rate cuts to come and that it's going to be pretty soon. And like I say, as central banks go, reading between the lines, what we're seeing is a very clear sign that the cuts are coming. OK, thanks, Ed. Some other business news stories for you now. And Sabadell, the parent of TSB, has received a hostile takeover approach from its larger rival BBVA, valuing it at €12.23 billion. The move from BBVA, Spain's second largest lender, comes after a series of approaches to Sabadell. The most recent of these was rejected on Monday, at which point BBVA decided to approach Sabadell shareholders directly. Sabadell, which is fourth largest lender in Spain, is yet to respond formally, but the Spanish government has said a takeover would lead to excessive consolidation in the sector. The FTSE 250 engineering services company Wood Group says it expects to continue earnings growth in the high single digits this year, despite reporting a 6% drop in sales during the first 3 months of 2024. It blamed this on a lower order book during the period for its projects division and the phasing of work in its technical consulting and energy asset development businesses. Well, the news comes a day after Wood, which employs more than 35,000 people worldwide, said it had rejected a £1.42 billion takeover from the Middle Eastern engineering and consulting group Sidara. Broadcaster ITV has blamed the lingering impact of the recent US actors and writers' strikes for drop in sales during the first 3 months of the year at its studio arms. ITV Studios saw its sales fall by 16% during the period to £382 million, which it also blamed on weaker demand from feed-to-air broadcasters in Europe, which it said had been holding back on spending until they saw more certainty in the advertising market. Advertising revenues in the period, though, grew by 3%, with ITV predicting a 12% improvement during the current quarter once the European Football Championships get underway in June. The shares are ahead by 3% at the close. Watches of Switzerland has bought the Italian jewellery brand Roberto Coin for £104 million. The UK's biggest retailer of Rolex watches said the move would enable it to build on its proven retail expertise in luxury branded jewellery, which it said had consistently outperformed the wider jewellery sector. Roberto Coin, which is based in Vicenza, Italy's jewellery capital, was founded in 1977. It's the 6th largest jewellery brand in the United States by retail sales and is best known for its extensive use of rubies. BAE Systems says it's aiming to hire a record 2,700 new apprentices, graduates and undergraduates in the UK this year. The UK's biggest defence contractor said it was investing in its people, facilities and technology in view of its growth outlook, which was supported by increased defence spending by governments around the world. It said its spending on research and development would rise this year, with investments in high technology areas such as electronic warfare, autonomy, laser-directed weapons, counter-unmanned aerial systems, synthetic training, electrification applications and space solutions. Now, it's been 70 years since J. Lyons & Co. opened the first branch of Wimpy in Britain, bringing with it the hamburger from the US, going on to become one of the UK's most popular fast food chains. Well, to mark the anniversary, Wimpy, which is now owned by the South African company Famous Brands, is bringing back classic items from its menu through the years. And joining me now to talk about this is Chris Wolfenden. He's General Manager at Wimpy UK. Chris, good to see you this afternoon. Are there any other restaurant brands here in the UK with this sort of longevity?
Not that I'm personally aware of, no. I think, Wimpy, we're celebrating 70 years, it's an absolute testament to the brand and, the franchisees, their staff and all the hard work that's gone on. And we're very proud to be celebrating 70 years.
What are the classic menu items you expect to do well?
What we've actually done with those menu items is, we don't necessarily always want to be looking backwards. The brand wants to be looking forwards, but we have, in this instance, looked at the menu offering that has come across over the years. So we've got offerings between from May right the way through until December that hark back to original menu items, but they've got a modern twist, and that crosses from shakes to burgers right the way through to desserts.
Now, at its peak, Wimpy had more than 600 branches here in the UK. Then an American chain with a Scottish name came over. You're down to 63 now.
Yeah.
Are you looking to expand again?
No, absolutely. Wimpy is we were one of the founders of franchising in the UK. We're a wholly franchised brand in the UK. We will be expanding through franchising. We're talking to not only current franchisees, but potential new franchisees. And, the drive and ambition with the support from Famous Brands is to expand the brand in the UK marketplace.
What do you look for in a franchisee?
Dedication, commitment, hard work. Running restaurants is not an easy business. There is a real sense of community and family within Wimpy, but that flows from its franchisees right the way into the staff. And it isn't always an easy place to be, but the rewards can be there.
The format varies from place to place. I mean, in some places you have table service, in others it's a straightforward quick service restaurant offering. What informs that approach? Is that down to the franchisees?
Yeah, the majority of our business is the casual dining approach, table service. We have got other units. We've got a unit that has actually been there since the very early 60s in a place called Milford in Cannock Chase. And that was a drive-to location, still is, and I'm proud to say it's still in the same family. It opened early 60s and it's still owned by the same family. So, flexibility of format, flexibility within the menu offering. I think, at the end of the day, any brand has to innovate, and we're certainly looking to do that.
As we heard today, inflation is obviously coming down, but how have you navigated the last 18 months in which we've had sort of double-digit food inflation?
With difficulty. Input pricing has been a challenge. I've got a very strong purchasing team. We've had to look at, possibly looking at different parts of the supply chain, moving supply. But overall, I think we've coped with it very well. Welcome, reductions in the interest rates and, stability coming back to the supply chain. So ultimately, we seem to be getting back to a better position.
Now, Wimpy introduced the first vegetarian menu option back in 1985, I think, in the spicy bean burger. What proportion of the menu these days is vegetarian?
Yeah, we've actually got, because of our cooking methods, we've got some non-meat alternatives, because at the end of the day, how you classify a product is down to the way that you cook it. But more so recently, we've got the bean burger. We were one of the first casual dining restaurants to introduce corn onto the menu. We, again, with the vegan market, we've also got a vegan burger. So there's plenty of opportunity for people who aren't necessarily a burger-based menu. And, sometimes that's a permission thing within families. If one person does require that, then the rest of the family can come in. They can also be served.
All right, Chris, we have to leave it there. Happy anniversary and best of luck with all the classic menu items.
Thank you very much.
Still to come here on Business Live. We'll have a look at how the markets have finished up. Don't go away.
As you say, it is not the typical dream for a teenage girl. I think the simplest explanation is that I was a really naughty teenager. I got myself in a lot of trouble and I earned myself a reputation. And for years, I fought between trying to live up to that reputation and trying to lose that reputation. And it wasn't until this incredible teacher came along and he saw something in me and he decided to fight for me. And it was him fighting for me that sort of redefined something in me. It made me not someone that everyone had given up on, but someone was worth fighting for. The sort of violent and chaotic and hectic side to prison life is really well documented. And that was a big reason why I wrote The Prison Officer, because I really wanted to share the bits in between that and the conversations that I had with people, the incredibly ordinary and interesting conversations that I had with prisoners. I think one of my favourite examples of that was a man called Domingo, who was an infamous drill artist, was heavily gang involved, and he arrived on the wing, and I probably had similar expectations of him as anyone else would. He sang violent lyrics about the crimes that he committed, and what I actually found with him is that we ended up talking for hours on end about philosophy and horoscopes. He was fascinated in them. I really hope that my book tells the different side to prison that makes people interested in joining the service, because I loved it as a job. And you talk about more training, but no amount of sitting in a classroom can prepare you for stepping onto that wing. And in the early days of my book, I speak about my first experiences on the wing, and I've got no idea what's going on. I feel so watched, partly because that's the way that a prison wing is laid out, and partly because those prisoners are watching you for every move. They're trying to figure out what type of person you are. I ended up catching tuberculosis whilst I was a prison officer. Unfortunately, infectious diseases are rife in prison because lots of people living in cramped conditions is a perfect storm for that kind of thing. And I became really ill, and I ended up spending a year recovering from tuberculosis. And I think that that's an interesting thing that people often don't think about. When you lose your liberty, you also often lose your right to health.
Well, the pound sold off on the foreign exchange markets after the Bank of England's hints that an interest rate cut in June is not out of the question. Sterling has, however, rallied in the last couple of hours or so, slightly ahead against the US dollar right now. What you're looking at just now is the equity markets in Europe. That's how they finished the session, all of them in positive territory, apart from the IBEX in Madrid. Shares are almost unchanged in Sabadell in that particular country. That's after the Spanish government made clear it opposes BBVA's takeover approach. Well, here in London, the FTSE 100 has hit another all-time closing high. That is the 5th consecutive record high. As you can see, up a third of 1% there. In a broad-based rally, Anglo-American is the leading blue-chip gainer. That's risen by some 3.5% as investors wait bid developments, while stocks exposed to the housing market are all trading higher on the Bank of England statement, among them Rightmove and Taylor Wimpy. The leading faller in the FTSE today has been the private equity firm 3i. That's dropped by some 4.5% after it reported a full-year decline in total returns. As ever on a Thursday at this time of year, a number of stocks have gone ex-dividend today. In other words, they're changing hands for the first time without rights to the latest payout. Among them today, HSBC and Admiral, the insurer, both those off because they've gone ex-div today. Outside the FTSE 100, well, the North Sea oil operator Harbour Energy has been a notable gainer. That had a trading update out this morning. The shares have risen by some 7% or so. Over on Wall Street, well, it's made a positive start to the session. Talking points today include Warner Brothers Discovery. That's risen by 1.5% on its quarterly results. But Airbnb is off by some 6.5% after it warned sales this quarter will be below expectations. And the big faller this afternoon on Wall Street is the video gaming platform Roblox. That's fallen by 21.75% following a profits warning. Meanwhile, the oil price, is more or less unchanged right now. It was trading higher earlier on today on news of a surprise drop in US crude inventories. Barrel of Brent crude, as you can see, well, it is more or less unchanged at $83.57 a barrel. Well, joining me this afternoon is Anna McDonald, the equity market analyst. Anna, lovely to see you as ever. I mentioned Roblox just now. A computer game company closer to home has caught your eye today, though.
Yes, I was looking at Frontier Developments, and they have announced that they're doing a new franchise of the Jurassic World Enterprise movies. Games which are associated with the movies that are coming out. And the third movie is coming out in July 2025, and they've today announced that there will be a game alongside that developed by them.
Obviously, it's had a bit of an up and down ride, Frontier Developments. Do you see better times ahead for it with this latest release?
Yes, this follows on from a trading update 2 days ago in which they reiterated full-year revenues are expected of 85 million. This is down from a peak in 2021 of around 120 million. They are still loss-making, but as the shares have recovered from having been down sharply. They were trading a couple of years ago at about £30. They're just at £3 a share at the moment, so that's a big drop. But it has rallied actually around 80% over the last 8 months, and this is it's trading near a 8-month high. And I think that's because we do see some bright spots ahead. You talked about Roblox. We're seeing difficulties in lots of other gaming stocks, actually. Microsoft, for example, that spent 70 billion on it. Some big acquisitions, including Activision Blizzard, is quietly making some cuts to their employee numbers in those areas, as we see that all that pandemic gaming has slightly started to slip away now.
Yeah, it's an interesting development. What do you put it down to? Is it just the fact that these stocks were so overhyped during the lockdown period?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of that, and there were a lot of mergers and acquisitions going on at that time. Microsoft, for example, was developing something called Game Pass, and they wanted to have a big stable of games in their portfolio to be able to encourage what was called the Netflixification of games. So they wanted to be able to offer a lot of games. It's a bit like when we go onto Netflix, we want to see lots of things that we can watch. They believed gamers wanted to have a big selection of games that they could just download and play. That's actually, since its peak of growth in around 2019, 2020, has started to tail off, and it's perhaps not done quite as well as people expected. And it was that hype, that was the pandemic hype. It was all the M&A that was happening that was boosting those prices. And Frontier Developments, for example, as a pure game maker, game publisher, they were one of the ones that received those really high valuations.
Now, I mentioned Warner Brothers Discovery in the market report. There was a particular aspect to their announcement that caught your eye today.
Yes, they have announced that they're going to be doing a streaming service, streaming bundle together with Disney Plus that have Disney and Hulu as part of their bundle. And I think that's another interesting angle, because we're seeing that the streamers are all realizing that we at home are starting to think, do we really need to have all these services? Do we need to pay for Apple TV and Disney Plus and Amazon Prime and Netflix? And they're aware that we're getting more cost conscious, that we have other uses of our time, that we can go out and go to the cinema or go to concerts or other leisure activities. So they're aware that we want to have a choice of really good quality programming. And this is going to bring together Star Wars, Marvel, Game of Thrones into one package. So we want good quality entertainment, but at the same time, we want to be able to spend less. And that's either through ad-supported streaming services or
sorry,
or just
we're out of time.
bundles.
Got to leave it there. Good to see you. Take care. Thanks.
Okay.
That's it from me. Back at 11:30 tomorrow. Hope to see you then. Cheerio.